It is day 9 of testimony in the Dale Warner murder trial. I'm Melissa Andrews, a crime and investigative reporter. Dale Warner is accused of killing his wife Dee in 2021 and then welding her inside a fertilizer tank where she was found 3 years later. Our first witness of the day is Michigan State Police canine handler Jack Taff, and I'm going to bullet point more of tonight's videos because this is just so much detail. So he was a Michigan State police trooper and a certified canine handler. He worked with drug dogs and cadaver dogs, and he explained that cadaver dogs help detect blood, bone, and tissue. They cannot independently find a body in a sealed container unless there was some sort of blood or other matter on the outside of that container. He did say that his dog could probably smell remains if there were holes in a container, and we'll get to that in a bit. So he first searched the Munger farm on April 27, 2021, 2 days after Dee was reported missing. He arrived around 12:45 at the request of Detective Greca, who again was the lead investigator at this time. He was asked to assist in this missing person investigation and bring along a cadaver dog. He initially brought a narcotics dog while waiting for the cadaver to arrive. So he started searching the dry fertilizer barn and the back of the property near the trucks, but the search stopped because Dale revoked consent. It's important to note that there was no search warrant yet at this time. So they go and get a search warrant and they come back that night, again, on the 27th. He brought the cadaver dog. He searched the barns and the offices, but did not search the spray barn. He said they search where they're directed to search by the lead investigator, which at this time was Detective Greca. So they talk about what a cadaver dog can and cannot smell. And it was talked about that the cadaver dog cannot smell through a fully sealed container if a body were wrapped in tarp and welded inside the container. The dog would not alert unless there was blood or decomp odor that had escaped outside somehow. He was asked if a body were inside an anhydrous ammonia tank, would the dog detect it sealed inside? Again, he said no. He also testified that ammonia would prevent him from bringing a dog near it for safety reasons. So he said, unless the dog is pulling me over there, like come search here, he's not going to take the dog over there because it can be killed by this ammonia. So on April 29th, 2 days later, he goes back and he has a conversation with Dale Warner, who referenced chemicals in the spray barn. He warned that dogs could be harmed by chemicals in the barn, and in fact said that his own dog had been killed by chemicals there. So he said that they did not bring the dogs inside that barn, although he stood there and looked through the barn. He was asked on cross-examination about the scent spreading, whether the odor could escape through small holes in a tank, and he said yes. Also about whether painted over weld holes could leak odor. The trooper admitted if there were holes without ammonia, the odor could escape, but he would not intentionally allow a dog to sniff a tank opening due to safety. So the defense is emphasizing multiple searches over years in May of 2021, October 2021 by the FBI, again that month, June 22nd, 2022, and that the cadaver dogs never alert on any property, on any of these searches. The spray barn was not searched on April 27th or 29th. So those searches that the defense is referencing would be weeks to months after Dee disappeared, though. They were not allowed to search in those initial days. He said at some point he did go inside the barns, but he couldn't tell exactly when. So a juror asked a question whether the return search was scheduled. He said they did come back once that warrant was obtained. When asked if a suspect would be notified beforehand, he said, normally we don't. You want to catch people by surprise. So he could not testify as to whether anyone did notify Dale Warner in advance. So our second witness of the day is Sergeant Jeff Hooper. He is a digital forensics expert, a Monroe County detective, and he was working on Celebrite extraction. So this is cell phone data, and it's used a ton in trials. So apparently Dale voluntarily provided his phone and password to this detective. Celebrite pulls your text, your call logs, photos, chats, and app data, and then it organizes it into a searchable report with hyperlinks. So on April 25th, the morning that Dee disappeared, there was a cookie placed from the My Cadillac app. That means an app was used. So the My Cadillac app was used at 7:08 a.m. Dale texts Dee at 7:45 a.m., says he's going spring, and then puts a smile emoji. At 8:48 a.m., Find My iPhone data is used. 8:49, it's used again at 9:04, and then a text to Dee at 10:02 saying, "Are you up yet? Feeling better with your migraine?" Another smiling emoji. So 2 days later, on April 27th, this is the night of the search warrant. Pay attention to this. 8:39, an incoming call from, it's saved in Dale's phone, Kevin at the sheriff's department. So Detective Greca is at the property on the 27th, and he calls Dale, and the phone call lasts 2 minutes and 5 seconds. Then 3 minutes later, at 8:42, Dale calls his son Jaron Warner for 55 seconds. At 8:45 p.m., Dale calls Jaron again, and at 8:49 p.m., Jaron calls Dale. So then we see that there is a 26-day gap in phone data in Dale Warner's phone. So there were no calls there. The prosecutor is implying that he deleted this information from the phone, and Hooper says it appears to be deleted. So the defense objected, says that's speculation, and the judge struck that. But again, here we are. By the time there's an objection, the jury already hears it. So they're not going to unhear that it appeared to be deleted. They're not supposed to consider that, but it was said. So the defense is basically arguing that this missing data could be due to resetting the phone from a prior backup. The phone is resetting. So they get into some other digital evidence. There was a Google search on May 5th, 2021, what to do with 1,000-gallon propane tanks. There were 2 Apple IDs tied to an iPad. Hooper said he could not access everything. The Apple Watch was not downloaded. So this gives us a look at the phone activity the morning that Dee disappeared, the Find My Phone used 3 times, the Google search about large tanks, and the debate over why those logs were missing. So we're starting to see some of this cellular data really come into focus here. And going back to the previous trooper, what they were and were not allowed to search in the very early days of Dee's disappearance with the consent from Dale Warner. So after lunch today, we're talking FBI search, journals, surveillance, and a financial motive emerging here, according to the prosecution. So first up, we have FBI agent Henrik Impola from the Federal Bureau of Investigations, the FBI out of Detroit and Monroe. So he was a part of 2 days of searching on October 11th and October 12th of 2021. He said he led what was called the White Team. They were in charge of searching vehicles, trailers, tractors, and outbuildings. He did not search the Warner home. They looked inside silos, grain hoppers, non-pressurized tanks, bins, and barrels. They did not search any pressurized chemical tanks. There was also a black Chevy truck that was there. It appeared to be used by Dale, he said, and in it he found loose leaf pages, black notebooks, and calendars where in some cases you could write your own date in. And in these papers were detailed handwritten notes tracking Dee's movements. I am going to just post a lot of them because there were a lot of them, and you guys can just pause and read them. But basically it would be like, she's going here, but then I find out she's there, says she's going to doctors, that kind of stuff, like tracking her and accusing her of lying. There's a lot of stuff about financials, so you can read all those notes. So the agent says he notified his team leader and he was told to photograph these items but not seize them. And the way that he did that was he would open up the notebooks, look through them. If there was writing, he would photograph that page. He was asked about the spray barn and recognizes that safe inside that's been mentioned several times now, but we haven't known exactly where that's going, and we still don't. But your mind can wander, and just take the notebooks and the pages themselves. And he really, didn't appear to know, because he said he notified his team leader on redirect. He said those pages made references to the state of mind of the description of what somebody might be thinking about the victim, so he thought that it was relevant. Up next, Detective Sergeant Scott Singleton of the Michigan State Police. He said that he became involved in the case in March of 22 when this task force was created. His job was to back up Detective Drewier. He said he spent probably hundreds of hours looking at surveillance videos, and he started looking into the financials in July of 2022 because Dale had said at that time that Dee stole a large amount of money and was living out of the country. So he had the financial guy look over the books and the charges. There were credit card charges on the business's account that were personal. Zach Bach has already testified to that. He said he was mostly looking for hidden accounts that she may have unaccounted for cash in, or enough money where she could live off of. He said in July of 2022, the amount started out at $1 million that was apparently missing, and then at some point it went way up to like $2 million. And he was asked, did you find sums of money that were unaccounted for? He said maybe about $34,000 over a 2-year period before she disappeared. He was then asked about the searches. May of 23, he said that the defendant had access to or owned thousands of acres. He said some were already searched, but we wanted to make sure personally that we were touching everything and going through each one. He said so they searched about 3,000 acres. Based on that, there was a more in-depth search on Paragon Road based on information they received during the searches of other properties. Mr. Warner went digging at Paragon. He said, we sent someone to make contact, a detective. He wasn't digging, but he was moving a collapsed structure. We put that property on the radar, but I think this is interesting. We wanted to see how he would react to us searching, and he did. He went to the property. So basically they're searching, they start, going over these thousands of acres. They want to see what the person is going to do. Are they going to go over here and dig around? Does that mean they're doing something? So they were very aware of what he was doing during this whole time. There was a house and a barn on that Paragon property. The house was torn down, buried in its foundation, and there had been some digging there. We had searched a couple times, and we were interested there. He said he searched the property the night we got the information. They made Mr. Warner aware and asked him to leave. This is on Paragon. And it remained guarded that night, and then they started first thing in the morning. The plan was to excavate the foundation. Dale shows up not long after they get there, and he wants to know, what are you doing? They explained. He offered to stick around and even use his own equipment to help them dig, and they said, beat it. So they go over all these surveillance cameras with him because he's been studying hundreds of hours of this stuff. And he talks about the timestamp a little bit. The timestamp is 1 minute, 35 seconds off. You got to figure out the difference mathematically. The body cams do not have that same problem. So he says as he's going through all this surveillance video, he sees Dale acting suspiciously. It was at 4:52 on April 25th. He was standing in the old shop and he looked out the bay door in a suspicious manner. He let his partner know this. So then they talk about finding Dee, and then how hindsight is 2020, basically. They start going back and looking through all the old footage because now it may actually carry some meaning now that they know she was found in this tank. So they're looking for the tank in all of this footage. Then they start really looking into welding because they're seeing a lot of activity of Dale's handling this welding equipment in all of these videos we've seen. So he is going through to see Dale's actions that day with the tank, and he comes across two images, and I have them. At 6:07, there's not a tank in the burn pile. At 6:37, there now is. He was asked, did you see dee-warner on any of the footage that you watched? He said no. He talks about how Jaron Warner, Dale's son, is pulling in at 8:55. He watched this to determine what happened to the tank that he said that the truck goes into the dry barn. So dee-warner was found on August 17th. There was a warrant, another one issued on August 27th. And this one was for tarps, duct tape, paint, decals, or any items associated with the tank or her disposal. So he took 3 white paint cans from Munger and a Tupperware container with white paint, and then he had paint sticks for each one with paint on them. So this was the feistiest cross-examination thus far, and he was asked a lot about why he found it so suspicious when Dale Warner crouched down. And then Mary Chartier asked him to keep replaying it. Where are you seeing him crouch down? He bent at the waist. He looks to be getting behind the truck, he says. And then he goes back to doing whatever he's doing. He said, it just struck me early on. And she said, well, you interviewed him for a few hours. Did you ever ask him to come in for an interview and talk about this? You had suspicions, but you didn't ask him what he was doing. And he said, no, we had a lot to cover in those 2 hours. And he's saying it's not an aha moment. And she's saying that as well. Jackie gets up and says she's being argumentative. The judge tells her to move along. He said, we didn't have the tank or the body or how it was disposed of, so we didn't ask him every single thing at that time. She says, you never asked him about welding or tools? He said, no. They talked about the non-factory weld. He said, I saw the photos of the tank she was recovered in. So it appeared to have a discolored line. So as I said, this cross-examination was very in-depth, at least as far as we've seen up until now. It went on for a long time, and it was very interesting. So Mary asks him, did you meet with Greg Hardy on October 12, 2022? He said, correct. He provided a thumb drive because he said he hired someone to do interviews and he gave him this thumb drive. But then they had some sort of disagreement or argument about where the case was going in the investigation. And then Greg comes back and says, wait, give me back that thumb drive. You don't have permission to use this anymore. He was asked, did you give it back? He said, no, I noted the text and got a search warrant anyway, so then I could legally search. And so she said, well, you were suspicious of Dale crouching over there. Were you suspicious that Greg revoked this consent? And he said, well, he's frustrated. His sister's missing. Objection. Judge agrees to allow this with Mary. And talking about you didn't record this exchange with Mr. Hardy because you chose not to record it versus like you've recorded everything else with Dale. She just wanted to know, did you think it was suspicious that he revoked it? That's the question that I asked you. And he said we had a disagreement. He was upset after I left the farm. So we're ending the day with some jury questions. The first one is Dale interviewed again after Dee's body is found? So the detective says, well, I attempted, and Mary stands up. The judge stops him, says it's a yes or no question. He says no. Dale was not interviewed again after Dee's body is found. The toothpaste does not go back in the tube. Was it determined how much money Dee had in accounts after she went missing and how much? He said, I looked at it and noted it. If you were going to leave forever, it was not enough money. Mary comes up again. Speculative, judge strikes. If there was a search warrant on 427, how could Dale say not to search certain areas? A lot of people have asked about this. He said, well, to clarify, that body camera was from earlier in the day, that search. Then they were bringing the dogs and the drones. It was then he revoked consent. So they left, got the search warrant, and came back. Was there life insurance in Dee's name when she disappeared? If so, what was the amount? He said yes, but I don't recall the amount. Jackie follows up, were the accounts being used on April 25th, 2021? No. On the search warrant, do you call the party and tell them that you're 20 minutes out or on the way? No. Were paint samples removed from the tank where Dee was found? Yes. The lab came out and made scrapings from the tank after it was found. They then requested I take those samples that I took from the property. I do think we're going to have that paint expert coming in soon. And she talks about how she compared these paints, and Mary's going to say, well, this same exact paint can be sold anywhere in this country. So day 10 coming tomorrow. And I got a hot tip today that it's looking like everything in terms of testimony is going to wrap up by the end of next week. So prosecution and defense. So we could be ending a couple weeks early.